Happy New Year, everyone. Got my party earrings on. I got my clock. I'm ready. Hi. Okay, let's see if I can get request for you to join. There we go. All right, we are waiting for Red Square Pegs to join us. Hello, everyone, for joining. This is going to be a really great conversation today to help us bring in the new year. How about that? I'm wondering if we're having a connection issue. Okay, let's see here. Valerie, can you message me in the chat at all? Oh, hi, Sean. I meant to text you today. I had a funny dream I have to tell you about. Okay, so it looks like unable to join. Let me see if I can request you. This is always the best part, waiting for that connection. Hi, Valerie.
There we go.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so happy we could find this time.
I know. Hey, Happy New Year, soon to be, right?
I know. I was telling everyone I got my party earrings on. They're like little things.
Oh, so cute. I should have. I know. I should have bought a little hat or something.
Yeah, so let's get started. I see we have some people that are joining and they're ready for this discussion, and I'm super excited about this. So as many of you know who follow me, this is not my first live. I am Dr. Lauren, and I love to bring awareness around dyslexia in many different capacities. Because as we know, dyslexia is not really talked about much. It's not really seen as a disability. And so it's really helpful when I have people that kind of come on and share their life experiences or their educational experiences. So as I always start off my live, I like to let the audience know I'm not an adult with dyslexia. So I just like to clear the air. But I did have my own learning struggles and challenges in schools. So as a special educator, this is a really passionate area for me because I started my career working in a private dyslexic school. So now 10 years later, I'm continuing to advocate and wanting to bring awareness. So I'm really excited to hear about your stories. So for our audience, do you mind introducing yourself and kind of maybe talking about what your connection and journey is with dyslexia?
Yeah, so first, I'm very honored to be here and share my journey with you and your audience. My name is Valerie, and I am a wife and a mother of two fabulous little boys. My connection to dyslexia runs very deep. I am dyslexic. Both my parents are, as well as my siblings. And yes, and my boys are. Both my boys were diagnosed in 2018.
Okay.
With all that said, I didn't really know what dyslexia was until my boys got diagnosed. And
wow.
My experience with dyslexia was not a good one. And, it came with a lot of shame and a lot of teasing and a lot of self-doubt, and that I carried with for many years. And then when I realized that my sons were having the same struggles that I was experiencing in school, I right away went down that path of like, they're going to experience the same thing. But along that journey of getting their diagnosis, I actually got in contact with an advocate, and I was in tears, and it was like tough love, but I needed to hear it. She's like, Valerie, you have to be strong for your boys.
Right.
There is nothing wrong with them. And just hearing those words, it was almost like she was telling me there was nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
And so in turn, like, I'm like, you're right. I got this. And so I just started digging in deep and really started asking a lot of questions. And I just realized that I was basing my fears for my boys on my own journey, and that did not need to be theirs. And
Right.
so that's kind of, the path that got me to where I am today with, getting involved with advocacy and starting to share my story.
No, that's amazing. And
Yeah.
I know you and I have had some personal conversations about your story that I think is something that I know that you said you're very comfortable with sharing. And
Yeah.
I know you've had a lot of hardships and poverty and homelessness and death. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that to kind of let our audience know, where you came from and now where you are today. And how anyone can connect with that. I mean, I'm sure there's someone out there that's like, wow, I'm going through this too. And I can
100%.
Yeah. So please.
So how much time do we have? I guess I'll start from the beginning. I come from young love. My parents were very young when they got together. My mom was pregnant with me when she graduated high school, and my dad was just a couple of years older than her. And, I've fond memories of my early childhood, but things, quickly kind of, the switch went off and things started getting dark. We were living in the Los Angeles area, and at that time, it was known as the epicenter for like the crack pandemic, and or I'm sorry, epidemic. And so there we go, dyslexia. And so, they got caught up in that, and everything that comes with drugs came into our lives, and things slowly started getting dark and chaotic. They ended up separating, and my mom got involved with another man who was also an addict, and I'm pretty sure had some ties with drug dealing, and
wow.
Our life became...
Oh, did you get a phone call?
Sorry about and so our life just became very unstable, and that was kind of the cycle of our time with our mom. And in 1988 she committed suicide. Wow. And that was like the beginning of the end of my childhood. I was the oldest of my siblings, and so it was really put on me to kind of step up to the plate. We moved from the Los Angeles area to just north of San Diego, to be closer to my dad's parents. And, I think they had every intention to kind of help out, but I think it was a little more than they could handle. So they did what they could for a little while. But we were really left with my dad, who is severely dyslexic. He's a man who has the kindest heart. He can rebuild a car engine, but he can't really fill out a job application. He was just never equipped with the right support for him to kind of find his strengths, I think. And I know just from stories and talking to him, like he just always felt like he wasn't smart enough, and he struggled with alcoholism and drug use. And I don't blame him for the life we've had. I mean, I did when I was younger, but now, once you become an adult and a parent, you kind of, your perspective changes. Yeah. And so, you just never knew when there was going to be food in the refrigerator. We went without electricity for a while, off and on. And, I'd come home to eviction notices on our apartment door. And that really, I started, I just had to worry about things that, a young girl, I was 9 at the time when my mom died, shouldn't have to worry about. Yeah. And this was basically the cycle of our life until I was 16, close to 17. And we kind of got our last eviction notice as a family. And my dad just said he was going to live out of his car. You guys figure out what you're going to do. And my sister is 4 years younger than me. And so my first priority was getting her, help. And so I called my grandparents, who lived out of state at the time, and asked if they could take her. And they did. So that was huge. But my brother and I were left to kind of fend for ourselves. And he's 11 months younger than me. So we were always really close. And feel free to butt in if you have any questions.
No, I'm okay. Really listening, because these are some things you haven't shared with me either. So I'm really just listening to
and honestly,
I will.
Yeah. Okay, good. And this is my first time really sharing my story openly like this. And so,
thank you for that.
No, I know it's the way I can make a difference in people's lives, because I've been through so much, and
Right.
my life it's completely different from where I came from. And so, yeah. Where were we?
Actually, I will ask a question.
Like,
So you had shared with me, you said your mother was Mexican and your dad was white?
my dad's still alive. He's white, and my mom was, yeah, Mexican.
Okay. So my
Yeah.
question for you is, as a person of color, can we talk about what that looked like in the, like, culturally, in the Mexican, culture, community? What was dyslexia seen as? Did you identify, or were you perceived as a white young girl? Were you seen as biracial? I'm just so curious to know about the different perspectives with race, because I feel like that really, well, I know it adds another layer to that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because the first half of my life, like, I didn't know my dad's side of the family. My mom's side of the family is who we spent all our time with. And she had 8 siblings. And every one of those siblings had a few kids. And so we were a huge, like,
Family.
Mexican family, and who were connected. And, every Sunday we went over to my grandma's house. She would make noodle with Kool-Aid, and the cousins would run around. And that's what I knew. And just, they lived in Carson at the time, which is, highly, like, very brown. And so that's just kind of, the world I lived in. And when my mom died and our life was, moved to the San Diego area, as I was with these grandparents I didn't really know. And to me, they were very fancy, and, we couldn't touch the walls, and, we,
Oh, wow.
like, it was just like, there was different, like, just different priorities, like, and it was very confusing. It was hard. It really made me question myself. And so that was really tough, because it was just far from anything I ever knew. And, growing up in the Los Angeles area, it was like a melting pot. Like, like, I had friends of all different backgrounds, and, like, the streets were tough there. And so people really watched out for each other and made sure their kids were safe and helped each other out. And then I moved to this area that was a small beach town, and it was, middle class, upper middle class to very wealthy people. And so, like, the year after my mom died, things are very blurry. I don't remember very much. But once entering middle school, it was very segregated. It was like, you're the white kids and you're the Mexican kids. There really wasn't anything else around.
Right.
And so I had to choose. But I wasn't sure
what side to go on.
I wasn't Mexican enough. I didn't speak Spanish, and I consider myself the whitey of my siblings. My brother's very dark skinned, black hair, and I get dark in the summer, but that's about it. And so it was really tough, and it was really trial by error to I really didn't, like, find my group until I was probably a junior in high school. Being poor and maybe looking a little different, and my learning challenges, started getting louder, and friends noticed and people noticed, and the teasing, and I was just an easy target. If I somehow made, a popular girl upset, and, rumors started going around, and friends turned on me, and it was just, a really hard time. Like, my home life was chaotic, and I didn't feel safe. And, you would think school would be a place you could go to where you would have that connection and just feel like you have people on your side. And it just wasn't that way. And, I don't know if it's because of the way I looked. I just know by the way I was treated. And it really, really damaged me in so many ways. And until they talk about, the people who are bullied becomes the person, becomes a bully. And that was kind of my case. I mean, I didn't become a bully, but when I realized, when I stood up for myself and I kind of didn't take anybody's BS anymore, I became a little bit of a tough girl and a chip on my shoulder. But once I did that, people stopped messing with me. But then I had this, but then I was kind of being something I wasn't. And so it was just a really confusing time for me.
So when along that journey were you diagnosed with dyslexia? I mean, did you always just feel different, or did you get a diagnosis at your teenage years?
Yeah, so my dad, he was diagnosed. Yeah, that he I talked to him recently because I'm like, okay, is this, are we all self-diagnosed? Or,
Right.
he did as a kid, he doesn't have clear memories, but remembers the test and all that stuff. I was identified through the school district, which, they don't diagnose, but they just identify struggling students. Um, but dyslexia was always kind of thrown around. And, I was handed a thick file just saying, wherever you go, it was my IEP, so I was in special education. I wish I had those test results so I could kind of see. And I've even thought about getting reevaluated, just to kind of see if we can figure out exactly what it is.
Right.
But, considering my family history and the fact that both my boys are diagnosed dyslexia, it's obvious that it's dyslexia.
Right. Sure. That if both of your parents, like you said, had dyslexia, then, obviously you do and your boys do. So
yeah,
I want to go back to your mom for a second, if that's okay.
Yeah.
How did you know she was dyslexic? Did she know that, or was this something kind of pieced together over time?
So my mom, when she was pregnant with me, she wrote letters to me. And in the letters, and it was just obvious by her writing, once I became informed on dyslexia, I definitely saw the signs. But in every letter, she ended with, I hope you can read and spell much better than I can. And so, I always remember reading that. And then, once a year, it's my tradition to go back and read it just to feel a connection to her. And as soon as I, read Square Pegs and talking about my struggles is new for me, and I've been very open about it. And my cousin actually replied to one of my posts and said, my mom is dyslexic too. And so, and I always, just things I remember my mom saying to me, it always, and then as I got older, I kind of connected it to I knew she was dyslexic as well. But then finding these, having these letters, seeing the signs, and then confirming through my cousin that her mom, who is my mom's sister, has dyslexia. And so, it was, and then, of course, with you, I mean, I can talk to somebody and I can see signs. And when I think about my grandparents and stuff, it makes me wonder, how many of my family members, are dyslexic.
So crazy. Just listening to your story, I mean, dyslexia runs deep in your family. Yeah. And so if you really think about today, our last day in 2020, but there are still so many school districts that are not acknowledging this today. So think about, I don't know how old your dad is, but let's just say in the 70s, 60s, and in generations prior to that, nobody really knew. They just knew this kid can't read, or this kid can't write, and this
and dyslexia has been around for 100 years. We've known what it is for 100 years, and it's still, and I got to tell you, there is a huge difference between being identified and being diagnosed. I'm a product of that, right? I knew I had this learning disability, and that's all I was told. And I thought I was dumb. I didn't know how to help myself. I didn't know how to improve my life. And then getting my boys diagnosed and be able to get them the proper support.
Right.
It's life-changing. My 9-year-old is reading at a level that I was reading at in high school. And, he's not reading at a high school level, but that is just how far the gap is.
Yeah.
And it's all because, my husband has worked very hard. I've worked very hard, and we've been able to supply, provide a good lifestyle for my kids where we can get these resources. And it's just, when I think about all the kids, I know I'm not special. There are so many kids that have, this very similar backgrounds, home lives, and, the odds are stacked against them. Yeah. And just having that proper education, they gives them a more of a fighting edge so that they can, change the cycle of their family, so that they can, make a difference in their own lives so that they can make a difference in the world around them, you know. And it's
Right.
just like with my brother, you know, we brought up like skin color and stuff. And,
Yeah.
you know, I felt like my brother, you know, he wore the baggy pants and stuff, but he was a good kid, you know. And, you know, he made stupid decisions like stealing a candy bar or whatever. But I feel like, you know, there was things he did that was a cry for help, where it should have been like, what's going on in this kid's life? You know,
Right.
what do we need to do to help him? But I feel like he was always treated like a thug.
Yeah.
And so it made him become a thug. You know, he got
Right.
into the system very young, and it was just a rapid cycle. And I have a story of one of my first jobs was at a cafe. And I was so proud of it. I was 15. I was working on a job permit, and I wanted to show my brother. And so I brought him on my day off. I brought him in to get a muffin, and we hung out there and ate. And the owner was there, and we talked to him, and he was nice to us and everything. The next day I come in and I'm cleaning the shelves, and he comes in behind me. He's like, "Is your brother a gang member?" I'm like,
Oh.
"No." Like my brother was 14 at the time, you know. He's like, "I don't believe you, and I can't have you working here."
No way.
Yeah. And so, like, you know, if this was today, like, I mean, the guy went out of business in 2 years, so that just shows you. But that was, you know, and at the time I was mad at my brother. I was like, "Why are you wearing those baggy pants?
Right.
Look what you did. Now I lost my job."
Right.
You know, and looking back, it's like, you know, is that the way he was treated in the world? It's like, no wonder, you know, he got into the system and was never like, my brother has a heart of gold, and he, you know, gotten, you know, being put on the streets, like, you know, where he had nowhere else to go. And so eventually, and then he was in and out of juvenile hall and then in the prison system. And like I said, like, you know, considering his home life, it was a cry for help.
Yeah.
You know, and then he was put in the system where he was, you know, like I said, like he was blamed to be a thug until he became the thug, you know. And you know, I was probably not the best choice, but he wasn't able to change his life around until he was in his mid-30s, when he met a good woman, and they got married. And you know, he is now a manager of a place that makes stone countertops. He's been there for many years and worked his way up. Him and his wife run a cleaning business, and they bought their first home. And
that's amazing.
You know, it just shows what happens when you have support, when you have somebody there to like that believes in you. And my brother always had that in him, you know, but he just wasn't able to, you know, he didn't have the environment, or he didn't have the support to like get him there, you know, until he was much older.
This reminds me of two things. So one of them was the live that I did with Hildebrand, and he was a principal in the juvenile system. And the biggest thing we talked about in that live was the fact that these kids that were already put in the system were identified as similar to what you're saying about your brother. Oh, well, they're a thug, or well, they can't read, or let's just send them here, or let's just keep the expectations for them down here, because if you don't have them here, they're not going to rise to the occasion, and they're going to find other things to do.
And what does that do to their psyche? They think they're down there. And I got to tell you, you know, I experienced a little bit of that in myself. And, you know, at some point I did kind of go down the wrong road, but I was able to turn that around. But I can tell you, my brother, you know, and my brother, like, my mom became abusive before she died, you know, with the drugs and stuff, and he got the brunt of that. And he was already like this, like, he just needed to be loved and supported, and, you know, and the bar was set low for him. And so, you know, that's what he set for himself as well. You know, he didn't have the structure at home saying, you can do better than this, you know, it was, and so.
Well, and I also think too, and I'm hearing your story versus your brother's, and it reminds me of a comment that someone had made to me. So this is a white woman who is dyslexic, and she was basically just saying, like, I happen to be white, a woman, privileged, like all of these things that check off the box. That, you know, this is one of the main reasons I do these lives, and I find certain people to do them with, because I want to bring light to the BIPOC community, and how it's not just a whitewashed disability. When I first started my career at the specialized dyslexic school, in Roswell, Georgia, I remember I was like the first person of color hired there. And I didn't see that as anything weird until later, because I think for me personally, I was kind of always the token Black, you know, and it was like,
yeah.
And so I remember after a while thinking, well, there were kids of color there, but there really weren't a lot.
Yeah.
And so over time, I realized, well, what's happening in the Atlanta public school system? What if some of these families are poor, or they don't have the means to send their kids to, you know, private school? How do they get this specialized instruction?
Yeah.
You know? And so I think like when this woman I was talking to had mentioned like she was severely dyslexic, but because everything was like not against her, it was to help her, she was able to get what she needed. But then I think of someone like your brother, where he was already pegged as, you look like a thug, you're brown skin, you have baggy pants, I don't like all these awful things that it's like,
you know, and like we're two siblings from the same family, and our
experiences so different.
And why is that? You know, and we do look, I mean, you know, we do look a little different. And yeah, it's just, you know, and kind of similar to you, like it was just our life and we just lived it. It wasn't until I was able to reflect back and these things stood out to me. And, you know, I wonder if like I did find success because, you know, female, lighter skin, you know, and, you know, I did go for opportunities, but were they given to me because, you know, of
the way you looked?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, honestly, I really feel that those things play a huge factor into this. And depending on, you know, where you live, and I have not been to LA, but I do know there were, I'm assuming there's still gangs, but I know that there are a lot of gang activity. So, you know, it's just interesting to kind of assume someone is something when they're not, you know? But I'm so happy to hear that he found someone that loved and cared and nurtured him. What was your brother's relationship with your dad? Were they close at all? Like, how are they now? If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, no, you know, my dad is kind of a big child himself. So it was never, you know, it wasn't ever really like a parent, you know, he was always more of a friend, I guess, not a friend, but just like one of us, you know, who was responsible for us. And yeah, so there wasn't like a fatherly relationship there. Yeah, there was, you know, they did do things together, and you know, they, during the time of when they were both homeless and not having a place to live, you know, everybody lost contact. But recently they've reunited, and my dad actually went and visited him lately, last year, I think it was 2 years ago, and spent 4th of July with him. And, you know, but then it's like a buddy relationship. It's not, you know, my dad wasn't somebody that my brother looked up to or learned from, you know, to kind of like navigate through life.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Red Square Pegs. So where did that name come from? What is your plan? I know you're talking about advocating, but tell us a little bit more about your ideas.
Well, you know, I guess I'll start with, I went back to college a couple of years ago to get my undergrad. You know, college was out of reach for me for most of my life. And I'm like, if I'm going to do it, it's going to be now. So I went back to school. But when COVID hit, like you know, things got a little interrupted, just like so many other families, like virtual learning is our reality, and things started feeling a little stressed. And so I'm like, okay, I got to reevaluate like where I'm, you know, investing energy into. So I had to put that on hold. But I was a little devastated, you know, because I had great momentum going. But this really opened up the opportunity for me to dive deeper into dyslexia awareness, where I found my passion in. And you know, and so I've actually, I just finished an advocacy program, and in this, I started my Instagram blog, Red Square Pegs, and just 2 weeks ago, I got noticed that it's an official company now. And so it's a startup. And so I'm building it to be, thank you. an awareness and empowerment brand for dyslexics. Red square pegs. Red is for the color of dyslexia.
Right.
And square pegs is just to remind us that we were meant to stand out. Like, you do not need to form yourself to be like everybody else. Like, you're going to find greatness in just being you. And so that, you know, and that was all inspired from my children because, you know, when, and I'm sure a lot of parents can relate, when you first receive that diagnosis for your kids, you go in fix it mode. You want to fix it, fix it, fix it. But your children don't need to be changed. They just need to receive the proper support. And I don't want to change my boys for who they are because they are unique and they're always going to be unique. And I don't want them to lose that. I don't want them to lose a part of their identity because they're trying to be something that they're not meant to be. Because that, you know, that's a whole issue in itself. And it's something I struggled through my life because, you know, I always felt misunderstood. I didn't feel like I really fit in. You know, even as a 40-year-old woman, I've had people who I thought were my friends make fun of me because of mispronouncing words and this and that. And, you know, it's like, it's so true. You've got to be careful about who you choose as your tribe. You know, your relationships in your life will either lift you or bring you down. And, you know, people can challenge you, but the people that challenge you to bring you down are not the people you need in your life. You need the people who are going to challenge you to make you better. The people that challenge you because they know you're strong, they know you're smart, and they're pushing you to just be your best self. Yeah. And so that was like my whole inspiration through Red Square Pegs. Like, you don't need those people in your life. You don't need to, like, you know, compare yourself or be like anybody else. Just be yourself. And so, you know, with Red Square Pegs, I have no, you know, I don't have an exact plan. I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but I do know I want to just promote awareness, you know, speak about dyslexia and empower dyslexics. And as, you know, as soon as I build this thing, I want to give back to the dyslexic community and help families that don't have the resources to get support for their children.
That's awesome. I'm actually really glad you shared what your handle meant because I wasn't sure. And I, given, since we just, you know, started talking and chatting, I knew that everything had a purpose for you. So I'm really happy that you explained that. And that makes
I've done a post about it, but I definitely need to do more kind of explaining of the name. But
no, that's amazing. So I have one more question for you, and then if anyone else in the audience has any questions, we can open that up. Can you talk a little bit about your sons and like when they were diagnosed and how they're doing? Do they, you're in Washington State, right?
We moved here in April. So
I was going to ask.
Great time to move.
If they put dyslexia on IEPs. I'm just interested to know like what your son's experiences and journeys have been, I guess now that you just moved there, or where you were before, whatever.
You know, my boys were both in private school. We moved to Arizona, and they were both in private school there. And, you know, you think with a smaller school and, you know, schools that would have more resources that, you know, my kids would have been identified through the school, but they weren't. They were my youngest showed signs very early. Now that I know what I know, you know, he was showing signs as soon as he was able to talk. But both boys attended preschool. I put them in part-time when they're 3 years old and kind of worked their way up. But his struggles, my youngest, his dyslexia is a little more severe. His struggles really started, you know, I didn't notice him so much in the academic side of it because, you know, he was young and I only knew what the teachers were telling me, but I was seeing it in the emotional side of it. And during, you know, every time we'd have a teacher parent conference, you know, it would come up that he wasn't where his peers were, but I would get the thing, well, he's so smart, he's so good at this and that, you know, he's just probably a late bloomer, it'll catch up. And so it was, you know, he like one day it'll click. But I was hearing that for a few years. And, you know, he's about to go into kindergarten. And I'm like,
something's off.
Like it's time. And my oldest, who was in a Catholic private school, they actually identified him in kindergarten as a struggling student. They didn't do an assessment. But what they did is put him with a reading specialist who, by the way, has no idea what dyslexia is.
I feel like most reading specialists don't.
Like, like I wish I knew now what I wish then I knew what I knew now when I was meeting with her, because, I would have asked a lot more questions. Yeah. But what they did is put him in he got 15 minutes of extra reading once to twice a week in a group setting. And that was their way to, support him.
Remediate, right?
Yeah, but, and, they were in private school, and I didn't know the laws. Like, now I know that through the child find, like, they were supposed to identify him and properly assess him in every area where he struggled, and they didn't. They just, this is what they're doing with other children too. And so it's just, when you talk about private versus public, like, there's issues all around. The schools that specialize in dyslexia is a different story. And,
yes.
But those are also very, very expensive. And so, yeah. And so, it was a long journey to get to the diagnosis. My youngest was diagnosed first, but when we were going through the process with him, and we did this all independently, out of pocket, we did the research to find, the schools, even when they knew he struggled. Like, I had one teacher with my youngest, he was probably only 4 at the time. So yeah, you might want to get him checked out, but I don't think he's old enough, and I don't know where you'd go. And it's like, this is a teacher, and she was an older teacher. Like, she's had many years in her belt of being an educator, and she couldn't tell me what to do. Yeah. And so, we were left on our own, and it was, but thank goodness, but we were always very open. We started talking, and the people would talk to us, and we just found, we were recommended some great places. And so my youngest got diagnosed, and going through that process, we're like, wait a second, like, our oldest is checking some boxes here too. This is all sounding familiar. And so when we were done with my youngest getting through that process, we assessed my oldest, and dyslexia. And so they ended up doing an intensive intervention program. It was because my youngest is more severe, his actually, I think, took about 10 to 12 weeks of every day. Like, this was instead of going to school every day, 5 hours a day, it was based off OG, going into the foundation of, and I got to tell you, before this intervention,
rewiring your brain.
Rewiring, exactly. Like, sign me up. But I got to tell you, before going to this program, he could not identify letters. He could not match them to their sounds. Anytime there was any type of just even trying to do ABC type activities, would break down in tears. I mean, by the time he was 5 years old, he was calling himself dumb and that he hated himself. So he went into the program, this kid, and when he came out, like, if you come to our house, he's pulling out a book and he wants to read to you. Like, he is so, like, he can read, his fluency, he still struggles with fluency, and, words that are new to him is, it takes time to really work through them. But he's like, he knows he's doing well. And, we have days where things are really tough and we kind of we regress a little bit, but, just when you think about, this is really just a year and how far he's came. And this is a method that could be put in our schools that every kid can learn. It's just, when I remember telling one of the therapists there, I'm like, I told her, I'm like, this could just, like, change so many lives, why, like, I got to tell you, it was very expensive.
I know. I definitely.
And
certified, I know how much people can charge. The private schools. I mean, one private school that I worked in, elementary school, was $42,000 a year. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And I'm in my 3rd private school right now, and it's not a specialized private school at all. And I'm finding that there are teachers that don't really understand what dyslexia is. But obviously in the specialized schools, they do. But it really is fascinating how this taboo word, disability, remediation is just like a hush hush topic when.
But is it because people don't understand it and they're not seeking understanding? Like, look at you, you were never diagnosed with dyslexia. You had your struggles and stuff, but you dug deep. And, there are, just as a mom, like, I got to tell you, some of these seminars I went to where it was teaching people about dyslexia, I was the only mom. It was teachers. So
Right.
there are resources out there to like start learning and like, and I don't know how we get the districts to start providing,
That's something that I'm trying to work on with Think Dyslexia. Like, and I know we've talked, like, I want this to become a business that is servicing school districts, communities, parents, to bring that awareness, even at the most basic level, that people really just don't understand what dyslexia is, or dyscalculia or dysgraphia. And it's like, these are all brain-based learning differences, that it's not about a kid being lazy or not trying hard or whatever the case might be. And so it's just, I think a lot of it is money. I think a lot of it is lack of knowledge. I think a lot of it is training. I mean, there's so many things around this topic that make it harder. But the more and more I hear these stories, I'm just like, how can we keep failing these kids as a school system?
And it just takes just takes a step to start moving in the right direction. Yeah, it's not going to change overnight, but it's only going to get worse. And like, you're failing these kids, and it's impacting, it's impacting the world around us, right? These are our future. And so, and I think it's more draining on the districts by not, the state of Washington actually, and I'm sure I'm sure other states too, but they are now doing assessments in kindergarten for all students.
Maryland's doing that too.
Yeah, and so it'd be interesting. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see. And I got to tell you, with my son's school, when he was in the Catholic school, when we called a meeting because he got his diagnosis, and the school psychologist, when we told her we want to put him through this intervention program, he was going to miss some school, but it like fell under like kind of a medical thing, so they couldn't like fail him out or whatever.
Right.
But she like, her demeanor changed, and she was like, well, if parents were going to do this, they'd probably do it over the summer. And, that was like 8 months away. And I'm like, this is the school psychologist. You want my kid to fail for another 8 months, get further behind. Like, how? And then it ended up being like, it was over like Christmas break and stuff. So he really didn't miss much school. Right. But it was just like, that was just the mindset. I'm like, are you serious? And the reading specialist looked at my son's diagnosis, and she's like, oh, this must be a new one. I'm like, no.
See, and that's the part that's really upsetting too. Is like, this is a systemic issue at the university level that I've said many times before. I mean, pre-service teachers need to understand what dyslexia is, how to identify, how to remediate, how to support, and the school psychologists do as well. And I personally feel like some of these professionals do know, they just can't, like, their hands are tied. I mean, I've said this in other lives. I've been at IEP meetings in public schools where I have been told by my team leader to not mention that I worked at a specific school for kids with dyslexia, and I wasn't allowed to use the word dyslexia at the table. And I was really confused, because I'm like, well, the running joke is specific learning disability. Well, what's so specific about it? And how are teachers supposed to know how to support if they don't know what the disability is? So who's the joke on?
And like, dyslexia is under the category of what that, that is. And so it's just nuts.
Well, such a blanket statement of specific learning disability that, and I think from my experience, and I was working in middle school at that point, teachers very much in the secondary world, they're like, I teach math. I teach social studies. So they're not interested in delving deeper into that. They'll just be like, oh, every time I ask this kid to read, he just goes to the bathroom. Or like, oh, he's just like, he doesn't read well. I don't know what his disability is. This is what his IEP says. Like, there's not a lot of like delving into it to understand.
Because I guess by the time they get into middle school and stuff, they're expecting that they've already been the tools so that they can do the work. And so teachers aren't prepared to have to dig deep. But I got to, like, we've had great teachers who really care. And like, I even had one teacher, we're in Arizona, tell me, please send me any information you know about dyslexia. Like she wanted to learn,
Right.
they want to do better, but it, like you said, it's, what they're being taught in school, what they're not being taught in school, should we say, and just, the support that they're receiving from their districts. And
well, and also teachers are overworked and underpaid, and
yeah,
there's burnout. I mean,
yeah,
I've seen it on so many different levels, working in private and public, and also this year has been really hard on teachers.
yeah,
So a lot of the things are teachers want something in return. So if they're supposed to go to a professional development about something that they don't care about, or something that requires a lot of work, they're going to say, well, what do I get out of it? And you know what? I can understand that through a teacher's perspective of, I have all this to grade, I have conferences, I have this, I'm paid this much, and you want me to do what? So it's really, there are a lot of issues that it's not just let's ignore dyslexia. I think there's so many complexities, and it really comes from the government level of like, we need more funding, we need more, like, bigger salaries, like, and this obviously is another live within itself, but these are a lot of the issues that I feel and I've seen in my education experience in the last 10 years.
Yeah, no, and as a parent, I've seen it as well. And, even through my experiences, like I really had teachers that, that didn't really help my situation, but then I've had teachers that were very encouraging and really made a difference in my life. And teachers do make a difference. And, we need to provide them the support so that they can put all that forward and just change lives in the way that how they show up for their students. And I understand that. And I really walk in, I think, through this journey, talking to other parents, there is a lot of them against us.
Yes.
And, I left Arizona, like those experiences are in my past, and I've moved forward. Is like, it is a team. Both my boys are in 504s, and it, really was like a group effort, and just doing that and what I've learned is just having that open communication with the teachers and letting them know that, it's not all on them, that I'm here to help support my kids as well. And so
absolutely,
my experience, even though it's all been virtual, has been completely different than what I experienced, in my old schools. And I think it has a lot to do with how I show up too, because I was really depending on the educators telling me, and now, I, instead of being a bystander, I'm involved.
Yeah.
And that's made a huge difference.
Absolutely. So I'm looking at the time here. We have a little bit of time before we'll get off.
Where did it go?
Yeah, and someone just said they're enjoying this live so much. Thank you for having and sharing this conversation. Absolutely, and that's why, both of us, Valerie and myself, we're bringing awareness. So I want to open up the last few minutes if anyone has any questions, and if not, please feel free to DM either of us, and we'll be more than happy to answer anything.
Yeah, and if you want to know more, and I know we didn't really go too deep into like some of my struggles and how I was able to overcome them, and how they impacted my life, and they really did. And so if anybody feels like they want more and a deeper discussion, DM me or Dr. Lauren.
Yes. And I think I've found in my journey of speaking with adults with dyslexia, I think a lot of people find comfort in knowing, like, when you do share those struggles, because you are in a different place now than you were when you were 9 or 16 or 24 or whatever. And I think those are the things that a lot of people are like, okay, wow, I'm feeling really low right now, or I don't know if I'm going to get out of this really unfortunate situation, but hearing this, I can do that.
Yeah. And it wasn't overnight. Like, it was a long journey to get to where I am now. And, and my struggles never leave. They're always there. And I forget, because, I may remember them and feel them in my heart, but when people see me, they don't see that. And, I know that if I went and met a woman like me when I was younger, that I was able to connect to, that really would have made a difference in my life, just to have somebody that was real and could really connect to what I was experiencing. And, it's just, it is when you're dyslexic and you have all these other struggles, I mean, it can be a very lonely place, and you're kind of always searching for your place, and it's just, sometimes that just never ends, and it's really hard to get empowered by just being you. And that, has been kind of my lifetime journey. And I would say, you know, I'm 42 years old, and I would say in the last couple of years, I've really started coming into my own.
Right.
So like I said, it's a journey, you know, but you can get there. And I think
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I am so grateful that we found each other on Instagram, and we have been able to chat, and for you to share your story. I mean, this is impactful, and I really feel that this video will be viewed many times after this live right now. And so I'm just really hopeful that a lot of people will hear your story, and I hope you continue to keep sharing it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. And thank you for giving me that opportunity. I got to tell you though, I mentioned to you the other day that, you know, I found you when I was on my personal page, and your whiteboard, and, you know, I searched for dyslexia, and you were one of the first accounts I found. And I remember, like, you really opened up a lot of information. You know, I might have not got all the answers on that post, but it really brought to me what I needed to dig deeper in. And I think that's the most important thing for someone that is dyslexic and they're trying to better their life, is just, you know, dig deep, understand how dyslexia shows up in your life.
Yes.
So it doesn't control you and you can navigate through it. And I think that was the biggest impact in my life, and being able to kind of take control and really, you know, just find joy in everyday situations, even when my dyslexia does show up strong. You know, it doesn't have that big of a punch like it used to.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And you know, when I first started my account with my whiteboards,
I love the whiteboard. I say bring it back.
I just might, because I really get a lot of positive feedback from people. And it was just like the teacher and me trying to find something real quick to just put good information. But my purpose for that was, people just don't know. And I said, you know what, I know this stuff, but people may not. So let's just smile and put it on.
They don't. And I got to tell you, as a parent and as a dyslexic, it's all confusing. Like, phonological awareness, like, what is that word? I've never even heard of it. And so it does help to have somebody who's, you know, worked with dyslexics for many years, who is educated on it. And, you know, some of these books are very confusing, and just to have more of a human connection and not so, you know, it makes a difference. And like I said, it made me dig deeper, because I'm like, oh, what is that? Like, you know, like, I got a gist of it, and I was able to do more research on my own and really get there. So that whiteboard, it's making a difference.
I think I'm going to have to bring it back then.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Well, listen, Valerie, this was amazing, and I appreciate your time, and I hope you have an awesome New Year's Eve.
Yes. You know, who knows what 2021 will bring, you know, it might be another, but yeah, let's just move forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for joining and your positive comments. And I hope everyone brings in the new year, and we'll see you all in 2021.
See ya.
All right. Bye.
Bye.